Hello, it's April 2022, and I'm going to briefly talk about something that I've mentioned over the years and some videos back on how when they were doing the so-called alleged investigation, which is supposed to be independent, when the two officers had allegedly charged me with alleged obstruction or resisting arrest and alleged assaulting a police officer. And I just want to highlight that the so-called investigating officer to that never spoke to me. And it's just a matter of procedure that they had someone else do the investigation for so-called to be unbiased or whatever, but no one spoke to me. And I never had the opportunity to say anything. So basically what we have here is an accusation, and then from an accusation with no real investigation, proceeding with the charges. And that's how they operate. But my focus I want to really focus on something that's very interesting. So during the questioning of the two former officers, one of the questions was asked, do I have any priors? In that, do I have any other convictions, assaults, whatever? And the answer comes back as, I have a conviction of allegedly assaulting a police officer. Now that seems to be standard practice when they assert, their claim that they were assaulted or obstructed or resisted or whatever. Now, there's two ways to look at this. Now, either they were only anticipating, say, for example, some sort of plea that I had assaulted the police officer and omitted the alleged obstruction or alleged resisting arrest. And originally it was resisting arrest, and then somewhere along the way it got changed to obstruction. I didn't even realize it throughout the trial, but let's set that aside for a moment. So it does appear that they were banking on a conviction for alleged assaulting a police officer. Now, the other way to look at this is, I had mentioned that when I was process serving on the side, when I was practicing law as agent, I actually had someone who was arrested and convicted of assaulting a peace officer. Now, when you're process serving, you have the status of a peace officer. And before anyone starts to wonder, well, why would I do that to someone? Well, it was an actual assault. I had initiated, or I had completed a serve, and as I was turning around, I was outside of this building, and it was kind of like, it was about 2 stories up, and it looked like a fire staircase, but it wasn't. It was the main staircase. So it was all that kind of metal, 2 stories up, and it was wintertime. Everything was icy and it was cold. And as I was turning around, I heard the door open behind me, and before I had a chance to even react, because I was still pretty close to the door, the person had pushed me down the stairs, and I had grabbed onto the railing, and if I didn't, I may not even be here today. So that was pretty serious, and I had some injuries from that, but whatever. And the day of court, the person had pled guilty to the charge. And then the interesting part is, the person who did it wasn't even the person that was being served. And that's all I'm going to say. Now, that would show up on CPIC, for example, or criminal record check or something, my name, assaulting a peace officer. But again, as I've stated before, with regards to my sexual assault complaints, which apparently have been showing up ever since I began it, and that was something that started, I think, around 1988. And the last attempt to get any kind of resolution to that was 1997. And I had a lawyer press charges and so forth. And anyway, there's videos on that. And I ended up living overseas for a couple of years, and that's another chapter of my life. what I didn't realize over many years was that my sexual assault complaints over that almost 10-year span were showing up on CPIC, but not clear that I was a complainant. So the assumption was that I was the perpetrator. Again, unless somebody requested the file. So that assaulting a police officer charge that I initiated in the performance of my duties shows up. So when they were saying that there was a conviction of assaulting a police officer, the high probability of my case that I initiated when I was in the performance of my duties could be mistaken. So right off the top, there's those two elements that show up. A lot of people don't realize that any interaction that you have with the police, say you call them about even a neighbor, shows up and will show up as a domestic. And if it's not clear that, you know, you were the caller, like say, for example, the victim, it could be assumed that you were the perpetrator. Now, when you start banking, you know, different times, then all of a sudden now there's a record of you with no, for example, charges or convictions or anything else. And this is one way that these computer police databases have failed, because it's showing stuff that shouldn't even be on there. And again, I've talked about that specifically in other videos. So I just want to point out how when it shows up that they have that conviction, it could be looked at it two ways. That they were simply going by, you know, how they usually do things, like, yes, this person's convicted before even the arrest is made, or that the charges that I had someone charged with were showing up. Again, not clear. So there's a lot of complexity to my story with regards to just that alone. And if it is the latter, that they seen there was a conviction of assaulting a police officer on CPIC, my name attached to it, they made the assumption, not knowing my career history or anything. So, you know, I've been really reflecting a lot on this, the injustice, and just focusing on that alone, because as I've said for even the past 2 years, it doesn't matter how something may have started, the reason why. It's what are the legal matters that are being dealt with, say, for example, before the courts. And just looking at how the two former officers escalated everything beyond ridiculous is where the real problem is. If they didn't do what they did to me, and I've showed audio, and you can listen to the audio in full, where even the female was asking, or rhetorically, I guess, she didn't understand why they beat me up. I was cooperating, and the whole 9 yards. So the injustice that has really has taken its toll on me mentally and physically. And it's not over yet. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And yeah, so I just really want to highlight something a lot of people may not be aware of, although I've talked about it over the years, and I've taken down most of those videos that I had made in real time as things were going along. And again, I did so, and I do so still, with no malice, no ill intent, but just sharing my story. And unfortunately, that's the story, and it is what it is now. So anyway, that's all I really want to say. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me all the time, when is it going to get easier? When you die.